I'm Katt and I use she or they pronouns.
I think it's hard to explain what a microaggression is.
A safe space is not necessarily a physical space.
Sculpted by the people that it's meant to be for.
To older generations, it's a whole new language. But on campus, terms like no platforming, safe spaces, microaggressions and preferred pronouns are increasingly the norm.
I'm Clara and I use she, her pronouns.
Yeah, I'm Molly and I use she, her pronouns as well.
New terms are one thing, but those that use them are accused by critics of an assault on free speech. The latest spat involves the former Labour politician Linda Bellos, a lesbian activist and feminist. She was no-platformed recently by the Beard Society, the gender and feminism group at Peterhouse College, Cambridge. Her invitation to speak was revoked when she told them she would be questioning some trans politics.
They wrote to say that they would uninvite me.
And what was the reason given?
That it would offend or upset some members. Boy. Forgive me, I don't want to be rude, but as a black woman growing up in Britain from 1950, when I was one of 30,000, being a bit upset was the least of my problems.
These days, though, Linda Bellos, like most famously Germaine Greer, is labelled a TERF, a trans-exclusionary radical feminist.
That some people, men, choose to identify as women, I understand, but don't let them suggest that they are the same as those of us who are physically and physiologically female, women.
That is anathema to activists. The Beard Society didn't want to appear in this report, but told Bellos they had to put student welfare first. At this Cambridge student newspaper, would-be contributors mainly opt to write in favour of the new radicalism, and many are supportive of so-called no-platforming.
I think to no-platform someone is not the same as to censor them, because it's not as if they're being kind of put in prison or taken out of the public kind of domain in any way.
I think really it's a case more of like students wanting to be considerate of each other, making sure that everyone feels as welcome and that our spaces, our public spaces, whether that's a lecture or anywhere else, are inclusive as possible.
University should be a safe space, but it should be safe kind of physically. It's not, if it's going to be safe in relation to ideas, this is some kind of fascist world. They think that what I might say will be offensive to them and therefore I can't say anything. Well, this is absolutely blasted mad.
It's a new and evolving world which puts the vulnerable at its centre. The Cambridge English Department's lecture timetable now contains so-called trigger warnings to flag up material that might be deemed upsetting. An advance warning that a lecture about literary violence, for example, will include discussion of sexual violence and assault in Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus and other works. For supporters, and there are plenty, it's a sensible idea. But
in speaking to academics here at Cambridge, I have picked up disquiet in some quarters about where this is all heading. One told me our duty as educators is to prepare our students for the world, not protect them for 3 years. One said trigger warnings appeared on their lecture timetable without any discussion. And another academic told me they had self-censored, deciding, for example, not to teach a particular text in case it caused offence to some students.
Cambridge University told Newsnight the English faculty's trigger warnings aren't departmental policy. Instead, they're at a lecturer's discretion. Supporters say this isn't another form of censorship. It's just about flagging up a sensitive issue ahead of the discussion.
That is the excuse for trigger warnings. But then what happens is, once you get a few trigger warnings, lecturers will stop presenting anything that's controversial. So the trigger warnings are a marker: do not discuss this. Do not discuss this sort of issue. So gradually, there is no critical discussion.
The issue around trans rights is at the forefront of a broader debate concerning minority rights and free speech. These students are members of Oxford University's LGBTQ+ society.
Essentially, where we're coming from with safe spaces and talking about microaggressions and trigger warnings, we're essentially just trying to make the world a little bit better and more welcoming to people who are minorities.
A person's identity and who they are is never up for debate, like ever.
People like Jermaine Greer made good progress for feminism, but her feminism has stopped at a point where it's not willing to accept that trans women are women, and that's the problem.
Is it possible for people to be unsafe just because people expound views that they find offensive?
Yes.
Unfortunately, the mental health issues of LGBT people are well documented. The suicide rates are so much higher than they are for the standard population. For trans people, we're talking nearly 1 in 2 people has a very serious go at suicide. So there is a real effect here.
Campus politics don't just focus on trans rights. Oxford's also hosted Roads Must Fall, the campaign to decolonise education, and others are picking up the baton. In big picture terms, that means demanding action on what minority students like these at London's UCL see as their university's colonial past. But it also means not putting up with so-called microaggressions.
Any act of casual racism, especially casual racism, that contributes into the othering of black people as a whole. So things such as your hair looks different, or can I touch it? It's our right, you know, as a student, as a human being, as a black person, to be respected on campus, to not have to deal with these microaggressions every day around our appearance.
University is about learning new ideas, free thinking, exploring, and it's becoming, some people say, university is becoming more about how students feel, and people say that that's not what university should be about.
I would have to completely disagree with them. The reason is though people, because I pay 9.25k a year. I've paid not only for my education, but an experience, a social setting that is comfortable for myself, not only for the one beside me, but everyone. It should be inclusive.
Especially with what's going on in America, I think we're hyper aware of what's going on there with essentially a very radical individual being elected as essentially the leader of the free world. And then so a lot of us become emboldened by the fact that we don't want that to happen here, and so it pushes us to pursue our ideas of equality even further.
Is this just the latest front in progressive student politics, or is the very idea of university under threat?